All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. My name is Noel Lyons, and this is another audio in the Jet Set Go series. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to be speaking with Penny Hunkin. Penny Hunkin is a registered dietitian and a member of the British Dietetic Association, the Nutrition Society, nutritionists in the industry, and dietitians in sport and exercise nutrition. From fueling fitness for sports performance to healthy eating and fat loss, Penny Hunkin has written, researched and talked to consumers and professionals about virtually every aspect of diet, weight management and exercise. She regularly contributes to national newspapers, magazines and health professional publications and has written or contributed to 10 books on all aspects of food, fat loss, fitness and special diets in a career spanning some 30 years. Penny's client list is a who's who of major food producers, and she has done freelance writing for the Food Standards Agency. She works extensively with a range of clients, including health, sport, fitness and leisure organisations, providing them with innovative solutions to their corporate and national nutrition projects. As I said, I'm really pleased that Penny's given up her valuable time to contribute on this project. So, good morning, Penny.
Good morning, Noel.
First of all, yeah, no, good. I was just stumbling over a few words, but we'll get into this.
That's right. Now, did you have breakfast? That's what I want to know.
Okay, we can talk about that. But, okay, let's start with a question. There was one from Candy on the site. It was like eating 5 to 6 times a day seems to be what the experts are recommending these days. But I have a problem with food and find that eating this often has me thinking about food too much. In the 3 to 4 hours break in between meals, I'm thinking of what I can eat, then packaging it and preparing, then eating, and then all over again, and then trying to eat on the same schedule every day as is recommended. Is there anything that you could recommend so that my life doesn't seem to revolve around food? I've made tremendous strides with handling my eating disorder, which was centred around a pattern of diet pills, exercising after eating, guilt then starvation, then bring in the whole works. And have been eating smaller more often for about a year now, but it makes me feel so obsessed with food. What would you suggest?
Wow. Okay, there's a lot in that question, Noel, and eating disorders are quite challenging, I think. But I think if I might give some sort of solace here, that a lot of people have a problem with food, and of course it can be incredibly distressing, and the thoughts and attitudes that go with an eating disorder, and of course may or may not be an eating disorder. I mean, today we have things like compulsive overeating, bulimia nervosa, binge eating disorder, bulla maxillaria, and all sorts of strange and weird, wonderful names. And I don't really mind, what that person has. If they have a problem, then obviously we need to see how we can help. Now, one thing that Candy needs to understand is, and I'm sure has already realised, that it takes a long time, and little small changes make absolutely huge differences, in the battle against a struggle with food. Now, going back to the question, the first question was, or statement was, that he is eating 5 to 6 times a day, and it seems to be what experts are recommending. Well, I don't know really. I mean, what we do recommend is that people start the day with breakfast and that they don't leave long gaps between meals. But as to whether or not it's 5 to 6 times a day, I think really is down to personal choice. And sometimes people have forgotten to listen about whether they're really hungry or full. They've lost those sort of internal signals, and so sometimes I think rather than trying to revolve around too much of a strict pattern, try and become a little bit more relaxed about when and how often they eat. So yes, start with breakfast and then have regular meals and snacks. But I don't know whether it should be I'm getting the impression here that they're following an absolutely rigid routine almost to time, and I'm not so sure that that's the way forward, because I think that builds in other challenges. Yeah.
Okay, so you place a big emphasis on breakfast.
Absolutely right. Yes.
And obviously,
yes.
Break the fast.
Yes, I mean, it's such a sort of statement these days, isn't it? Everyone says, you can't expect a car to run without petrol and We can't expect run the body without fuel, and mind and body work better during the morning after eating. The bottom line truth is that actually, breakfast does mean breaking the fast. It's we know from the research that breakfast eaters tend to be happier and better able to concentrate during the morning. They tend to have higher intakes of essential vitamins and minerals than breakfast skippers. And you generally speaking will find also that if you're struggling with your weight, breakfast eaters tend to be more lean than breakfast skippers. So, there's a heck of a lot of good reasons why you should have breakfast. I suppose the bottom line is, what is breakfast? What do you eat? So in this situation, is it the sort of thing, do you jump out of bed and have breakfast? Or is breakfast something you have 1 to 2 hours after you get up? Because a lot of people don't feel hungry.
That was going to be my next question. Is it something you have straight away as soon as you do awake? Because I know for some people, they're really, really not hungry.
No, absolutely right. It's personal choice. All I know is that, say for example you're working at, say 9 o'clock and you get up at 7 and you shower and you faff around and do whatever you have to do before you get to work. If you haven't had anything to eat in that period, your concentration just won't be what it is. Your energy levels will be sagging, and as the day goes through, what tends to be a sort of common thread here is that these people who skip breakfast tend to not eat too much during the day, and then they find their appetite is a bit more out of control towards the evening. And they're the sort of people that say, when I get home, I just can't keep my head out of the fridge. I just can't keep my head out of the cupboard, and I tend to feel quite hungry. But when I get up in the morning, I don't. So I think that's something that people need to address. And it doesn't have to be a full-blown meal. We're talking about maybe something as simple as a bowl of cereal, milk, or maybe some fruit and yogurt, or fresh fruit on its own, just something really to pop up the blood sugar to give you a bit of a kickstart.
Again, it's one of those things that gets talked about a lot though, isn't it, this whole idea of cereal nutrition. What should we look for in the cereals that we have? That'd be my first question.
Well, I will sit here and say that I am actually the spokesperson for the British Cereal Information Service, and so you picked a good one here, Noel. But the thing about breakfast cereals is there's an enormous range, and that's why I'm happy to be the spokesperson, because there's something for everybody. And some people say, oh well, actually, you should have one without salt and sugar, or you should have one that's high in fibre. Well, okay, that's fine if you want to have more fibre in your breakfast and you're watching your salt and sugar levels. But on the other side of the coin, breakfast cereal manufacturers have actually done a lot towards what they do and don't put into cereals. So really, the best thing I can say is read the label and choose what you feel is right for you. Now, if we look at whole grain, for example, whole grain cereals is a great start to the day, and we know that whole grains and a higher intake of whole grains, 2 to 3 portions a day, is linked to a reduced risk of cancer and heart disease. So it's really important that we think not just of, it's good or bad or right or wrong. What are we trying to achieve? How are we trying to look after ourselves? And if we want to eat 2 to 3 portions of whole grain a day, and we're depending on what else we eat for lunch and supper and snacks, then, a whole grain cereal in the morning might be the one to choose. So it's really personal. If I was dealing with an athlete who was going to go off for a run, and an endurance run, they might be better off with quite a sugary cereal with little fibre, because they don't want anything in their tummy or something that's going to hang around, because they might just throw up on their run, to be quite frank. Do you know what I mean? So it's horses for courses. I think if you want to be and well, look for things that are wholesome, that maybe check the food labels. If you want to reduce sugar and salt, look at that, compare one against another and make the choice. And my feeling is, don't buy it simply because you think you should. Always use and eat something you like. It's really, really
well,
key.
I guess I cover my bets then, Penny, because I always mix and match mine. I have about 3 or 4 different, and I just put them all in together.
Isn't that wonderful? It's a bit like if you go, to stay in a hotel and you see lots and lots of different cereals on the buffet bar, and you can have, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and quite frankly, then, everyone talks about eating lots of fruit and veg. You can put some fruit on the top, some fresh fruit or some dried fruit. You can put milk on it. You can put yogurt on it. If you don't want to do that, you can put fruit juice on it. Really, let's ring the changes. Let's be experimental. Let's try new things. And I think, that's a great start for people who are struggling with anything to do with their eating habits. Try and legalise all foods and enjoy what you're doing. Great message, I think, there.
But the possible red flags with cereals would be the sugar and the hidden sugars, certainly in the first three of the ingredients, salt, and then any additives.
Well, when you look at a label, you see it's a little bit confusing these days because there's a whole new raft of food labelling coming in. The Food Standards Agency is looking at the traffic light system. The food industry is looking at what we call GDAs, which says that in a portion is guideline daily amounts, which means there's a bar on the front that says if you have a portion of this cereal or whatever food it is, it will give you X% of salt, sugar, iron, calcium, or whatever is in there, and it guides the person to make a choice. So I would say look at the ingredients list as well, because the things that it's highest in will be listed first, and the things that it's lowest in are listed at the end. And so look very much at the ingredients list, because I think sometimes it's a little confusing in terms of looking at the labels. And some people are getting a handle on these different labelling systems, and some of them are becoming quite clear. So again, I think just think carefully before you buy, look at the food label terms, and make your own choice. If you like a particular two cereals, turn them round and have a look and see what they offer. And if you want to reduce sugar, look at the one with the lower sugar, but choose something you like is the key. Just remember the things like, food labellings, it is changing, but certain terms such as like fresh, pure, natural, wholesome, hearty, traditional, they don't have a legal definition, and they don't really mean anything as far as the food content is concerned. Do you know what I mean? So, there's no legal definitions for terms such as low, reduced or high, except for in butter and margarine and spreadable fats. So again, I think you just have to go down and decide what you like. And again, my message generally to clients is if you really, really, really like something, do not deny yourself of it, because do you know what? Guess what happens if you choose not to have something you really like? You eat more of it, or you think about it and you dream about it, and then you end up probably pigging out on it. So I think the key is just to find is to be sensible, look at the label, and make a decision based on what you're trying to achieve. So
okay. Now, is it a bit of a cliche that the metabolism is higher early on in the day than later in the day, or is there good evidence for that?
Oh, metabolic rate. That's such a difficult question.
Yeah.
To be quite frank, I'm no expert on what it does from every hour through the day, but what I will say is that what we do need to do is try and keep our metabolic rate as high as we can, and how do we do that? Is by regular eating. I'll put my trainer's hat on for a second here. Let's try and make sure that we have a good amount of muscle mass. So we have a rounded training program to maintain some sort of good muscle mass to fat mass ratio. Because when we look at the amount of fat mass contains muscle mass contains these busy little cells that burn calories called mitochondria. And that's what happens when we train. We burn more calories both from the exercise and then we obviously get stronger and increase the number of mitochondria in the cell. So we burn more oxygen. So metabolic rate is all to do with how much oxygen we burn. And I'm far more interested in what we do over a 24-hour period and over a week and over a month and over a year than I am in any particular time of the day. Do you see what I'm saying?
I've got you. Okay, brilliant. Thanks for clarifying that one. So we'll come on to like metabolism boosters, muscle mass, etc. But let's just go back to Candy's question, which is like the frequency then of meals. We shouldn't really go by time, like a set time every day. Should we just wait until we are hungry, or should we aim for every 3 to 4 hours, or how can we help? Obviously, if there's 200 people listening, what would be an ideal sort of goal to go for?
It's such an interesting question. If you have the sort of life that is a little bit more structured, and maybe you're working in an office and you can have a lunchtime break or an afternoon break or whatever, then I think this is a lot easier. Some people can't run timetabled eating quite the same, and so I think what you need to do is not leave more than about 5 hours between meals. So that's quite a key point. So you start the day with something to eat, and then try not to leave long times between eating phases. So say, for example, you ate your breakfast at 8, you really should start to think about having something by 1. So that would naturally put you into lunchtime. Now, if in the middle of all this you feel a bit peckish, it would be quite a good idea to go and have a drink and something to eat and think about, what would be useful to eat there. Well, we're all talking about fruit and veg, so maybe a piece of fruit or maybe a yogurt or something like that. In terms of timing, just don't leave more than 5 hours between meals. Now, some people get along very nicely with a very sort of more of a rigid routine because they can be planned and prepared, and they've got, they can take stuff in their bag with them if they're on the move, for example, and they've got a couple of snacks and they know they're going to have something for lunch. Other people are a little bit more haphazard, shall I say. So I think you have to work out what's right for you, but if you can eat more regularly, the general consensus is that it's much better in things like appetite control, weight management, and just general feeling of energy levels, So eat relatively frequently, but I'm not so sure that people should sort of set the stopwatch. Do you know what I'm saying?
So like no carbs after 6 o'clock and that sort of thing. It's a little bit.
Well, I mean, that's another point entirely, really, about what you eat at that particular time. But I would say, in terms of timing of meals, I would suggest that again, if you've got more of a pattern to your life, it's easier than those who might get sabotaged. We all get sabotaged. So all I would say is, be prepared. Carry snacks with you in your bag, or your sports bag, or your handbag, or the car, the glove compartment of the car, so that you don't get caught out, and sort of plan in advance. So maybe again, if you work in an office, you could take something to work with you to have for lunch, so you're not just dependent on what's around you. So planning and preparation is the key. But I think don't allow yourself to get so very, very hungry, because when you get very, very, very hungry, you might eat a very, very, very large amount. So try and keep that energy level, try and keep your energy intake quite steady. It's quite good for your blood sugar, quite good for your energy levels. So regular eating, just don't leave long gaps.
And it's just common sense at the end of the day not to eat a big meal before sleeping, because it will affect your sleep pattern.
Well, I would definitely recommend that people try and weight their food earlier in the day, rather than eating a massive meal, particularly late at night, because you're absolutely right, Neil. It can disturb sleep patterns, and once you lose sleep, you feel out of sorts, nothing goes right in the day, your eating patterns will go all skewy, everything else, you won't feel very happy with the world, and all sorts of things start to happen. So I would say try not to eat too late. And of course, unfortunately, that's really what happens with most people, is it not?
Right.
A lot of people, they're so busy in the day, and from a social perspective, it's often the only time people get together. So be careful about eating really large meals, particularly meals later on at night. I would say that's particularly something to keep under control and not make a habit of doing.
But Bernadette also asked me, when is the best time of day to train? Again, I think it's not the big picture. The big picture is just get your sessions in. That's the biggest problem. But certainly there isn't really a good time of day to train. I tend to avoid weight-bearing activities earlier on in the morning, like jogging, because there is this belief that overnight your synovial fluid tends to dry up a little bit and you're a bit stiffer first thing in the morning, and hence it's a little bit more sort of impactful on the joints. But apart from that, you should really train as and when you can fit it in, and as and when you feel good, which for most people is probably late afternoon to early evening.
And I think, from a nutrition perspective, we have people today, we're so much more sedentary because of labour-saving devices, cars, escalators, and so on, that, it's important that everybody remains really physically active and, train whenever you can. And some people, they find they can fit it in better before work. Some people find they can fit it in better at lunchtime or after. Well, it's all to do with accumulation, isn't it? And again, going back to looking at the concept of the management of a healthy weight, I remember years ago when I first heard about pedometers, those little things that you stick on your usually the waist area, and it counts the number of steps that you do. And I just thought, what a wonderful idea, because you see, all of a sudden it gives somebody an accumulation of the number of steps they do over the day. So for someone like me who for years and years and years says, when you're in the office, please take the stairs, not the lift. You know, when you do this, walk across, park your car the furthest end of the health club or the supermarket and have that extra 50-metre walk. You're going for a workout, for goodness sake, you know. And oh, well, what good will that do? That won't make me lose a kilo. And I said, well, no, that 50-metre walk won't. But if you did that several times a day and made life a little bit more active, that would be accumulative and build up to an extra calorie burn, which would help you in the management of a healthy weight. Not necessarily weight loss, but just to stop further weight gain. In the 3 to 4 hours break in between meals, I'm thinking of what I can eat, then packaging and preparing, then eating, and then all over again, and so on, and trying to eat on the same schedule. So, you know, if we can just sort of reiterate that, try and become a little bit more relaxed. It's important to plan and prepare, but on the other side, don't let food rule your life, you know, and how can we do that? Physical activity is one thing, you know, it's social, you could go meet people, you can get out. You have to take the emphasis away from thinking about food all the time and try and get your mind to consider something else. So you know, something that is either social activity, you know, something to do with work, something to do with physical activity, anything to stop this almost sort of obsessional behaviour and permanent thinking about food. In essence, I think it's very, very simple. The only way we get fatter is we're eating too much for our energy needs. So we've either got to eat less, right? Change the calorie content of what we eat, or in conjunction with that, do more. And it really is simple. Where the problem arises, I believe, is that people can't understand as how to implement, you know, in essence, eat less, exercise more. It's a simple message. What people need is direct tips for their particular situation. And I know from my client base over the years that where I come in handy is I help clients to identify risk areas and areas that they can improve upon without it being such a major change. So it might be that they you know, we look at, for example, they might write a little food diet, so they write down what they eat at breakfast, lunch, dinner and snacks, and then, you know, I could look at that and I might, you know, from the ideal sort of gold standard say, in my own head, gosh, there's so much here we can change, but nobody can change all of that. Exactly, where do we start? So what I do, we discuss, you know, one or two things that the client would find easier. So what are you most in control of? And say, okay, for the next few days, or for the next week or two, let's concentrate on, for example, what you eat for lunch. You know, what access do you have for lunch? Do you have it at home, or do you have to have it from a works restaurant or cafe or canteen? Do you have to buy it on the run? You know, how do you manage lunch? Is it something that you just buy a quick sandwich? You know, what do you do? And then we look at that and we discuss how they can manage that and improve upon it. And then they go away and try, and if they succeed, then we look at something else that we can sort. But that's the sort of change process. I think one of the things that people probably try and do is they try and change too many things all at once, which is just like, you know, pressing the let's not succeed button. Because we can't change so much about our diet and exercise habits overnight. It has to be a very sort of well, of course, exactly. That's another issue. That if people suddenly say, right, you know, today I'm going to be doing this, tomorrow I'm going to get up, it's a whole new day, I'm going to go bang, 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 bang. Just anything that happens in your life that comes to challenge you, this will go flying straight out of the window. So try not to change too much all at once. And again, we know from the pattern of dieters and when you track dieting behaviour that what will happen is that people will maybe be relatively successful. If you measure that by weight loss, for example, they might lose, you know, a few kilos here and there and be very happy with what they're doing. But because they haven't learnt from that experience and they've been doing too many things that are alien to them and not sustainable, they lapse straight back into what they were doing and the weight tends to go back on. So they haven't really learnt anything and then they get doubly depressed because all that effort seems to be
wasted. We've just got a few excuses, as I just sort of, you know, call them. I mean, one is, I've got an underactive thyroid, you don't understand. I mean, what percentage of the population actually have a thyroid problem?
Oh, yes.
I was hoping you'd say that.
hardly any, really. Very few. I mean, very, very, very few people. I mean, a lot of people say, yes, it's my thyroid. I've got an underactive thyroid. Well, to be quite frank, that's highly unlikely. Yes, some people are diagnosed with an underactive thyroid, and they do have problems, and it's a medical condition, and they have to be given thyroxine and get their thyroxine levels correct.
And
that's done by the medical practitioner. But quite frankly, most people aren't in that vein at all, and it's an excuse. Well, I mean, if you are feeling tired all the time, there's all sorts of reasons it could be, not necessarily your thyroid, but if it was your thyroid, that would be one of the symptoms. I mean, the thing is, if you are feeling tired, it could be it could be stress, it could be pressure, it could be that you're slightly anemic, you haven't had enough iron in your diet, your iron levels are low, it could be underactive thyroid. There's a whole, and there's other issues. There could be a medical condition that, that you need some help with. So all I would say is to anybody that's listening to this now, if that tiredness is starting to impact on their
the bottom line is
everyday life, there's no harm at all to go and get them checked out with your medical practitioner. Book that appointment and go. You're not wasting their time.
Yeah.
Well, yes, genetics. I mean, you are. I mean, sometimes I think a lot of people wish they'd chosen their parents differently. And if you're going to have a stockier frame with shorter legs and be more muscular, or put fat more prone to putting fat on your hips and thighs or whatever, that is your genetics. And what you have to do is make the best of what you have. With the best will in the world, your genes are your genes, and that is quite a predictor for all sorts of things, including body shape and obviously health issues.
Would you agree with that?
As you age. Well, I think I'm going to have to take your lead on that now. It's something it's not a figure I can actually agree or disagree with. So I'd have to go and look that up myself.
Parents.
Well, you've hit on another great point now. At the end of the day, a lot of our habits obviously are learnt from the people that that surround us, and that includes our parents and people who impact on our home life, particularly when we're younger. And you tend to see these traits within families, even down to mannerisms. I mean, like mother, like daughter, like father, like son, and eating habits in themselves tend to be learnt behaviour. And so again, that's something that we need to obviously factor in. And that will come back down to change, and obviously if people are trying to change, if you're living in a family situation, for example, where, certain eating pattern has always been the norm, it's very difficult to try and just change you as a single person within that framework. So maybe it needs to be a bit of a team event.
Wait till you have children. It's not possible to do so. Do you get that a lot, Penny?
Absolutely. And, people blame all sorts of reasons for that, but pester power is enormous. And, in a busy day when you've had a hard time with the kids, and, some days you get good days and some days you get lots of good days, sometimes it's very tempting to say, have it. just have it. And, what's wrong with that occasionally? But as long as, I use a sort of 80-20 rule, Noel. Sure. If you get things pretty right, 80% and pretty wrong 20% of the time, and I think, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I picked up on that too. Now, obviously, there's a little bit of various issues here, but you lay fat cells down in the womb. There's three major times in your life. And they're laid down obviously in the developmental period, sometime during before you're born. Then, as a toddler, you tend to lay down some fat cells, which is why it's really important that parents try and keep their babies and toddlers' weight to a manageable, healthy level, and get regular checks, with their practitioners. And then the third time is around sort of adolescence. And then the number of fat cells, you're pretty much fixed for the rest of your life at that stage. Now, what happens is
analogy. I like
that these fat cells, if you imagine loads and loads of if you like, unblown, and you've got hundreds, if you've got hundreds and thousands of them, and that's there under your skin. And what happens is, as you lay fat down, if you eat too many calories, and your body converts this extra energy into body fat, because basically our bodies haven't learnt that the shops are open all day and there's loads of food available, and they think we're still going to have shortages of food after living in caves and things, and that's just not the case. So we lay this extra fat down in the fat cells, and the fat cells blow up. So if you can imagine, you've got flat balloons, and then you blow them up. You've got a much bigger area, haven't you? And that's what's happening with your fat cells. So when you lose weight, the reverse will happen, and the fat will come out of the fat cells, but you will not lose the number of fat cells that you have laid down, and that tends to be genetically determined. So some people are generally, you know, the genetic trait is they might have more fat cells than others. And I have to say that as far as I'm aware, I think that there is a general consensus of opinion that in gross obesity, when people get very, very obese, the fat cells start to split. So in that situation, you start to increase fat cells when normally you wouldn't have that happen, and then you get fatter again. So, and again, once you lose weight, you've got that number of fat cells there. They don't go away.
Because obviously, what we're saying, if this is the case, that you're literally setting your child up for life in terms of whether they're going to be the correct weight or not.
I think again, it's important that parents get their children measured regularly. We have what we call percentile charts, these growth charts, which have sort of maximum and minimums, and you can plot where your child is at their age and weight and so on these charts. And obviously they start going above the norm, and they start to become over fat, if you like. It's really important, so vitally important, that parents get behind this and work as a team and help that child to control their eating or get them more active or whatever it takes. Weight loss in children is not something that we don't tend to aim for particularly. We like them to, if you like, can you understand the term, grow into their weight. So as they grow, and you can imagine in adolescence, you know, they go through quite a good growth spurt, and they can gain several inches in height, and that way we could see that they'd sort of stay the same weight and yet lose the body fat. So and again, I think with children's weight loss, it would be worth, you know, if you're very worried, going to talk to a health professional about this, because you know, there's some very good ones out there that can help. But the key is don't leave it. Really, don't leave it. It's something that's so hugely important, because you are setting up really we're setting the scene for the future, really. And you know, often you say fat child, fat adult, and you know, generally there is that trend. So try and keep your children's weight to a very healthy level, and get regular checks. And if you need help, seek it. It's the best thing you can do for your children. Of course, you know, the older you get, the more responsible you are for yourself. So, you know, whatever happens, it is down to helping yourself.
There seems to be this idea that we're sensitive to certain foods like wheat, dairy, and I'm just seeing no end of detox and elimination diets, and yet massive take-up by the public just following this, which goes back to some of the things we've been saying earlier anyway. Yeah. It's not just in itself, doesn't it? Yeah.
Okay. A great question. I could probably talk all day on this one, but I'll try and be concise. First of all, people must never self-diagnose. So if they feel that they have a problem, and yes, some people do, get it professionally diagnosed and to get some professional help, because quite frankly, we know there have been studies to show that if you take a group of people who believe they are intolerant to whatever the food is, that only a certain percentage of those people actually are, and the vast majority aren't. And why deny yourself foods that make up part of a healthy, balanced diet, give you a range of, you know, extra vitamins and minerals, whatever is in that food? Why take that out of your diet and make life difficult for yourself? Now, that's from a sort of allergy and intolerance point of view. Now, some people are clearly allergic to foods, things like a nut allergy, life-threatening. You can go into anaphylactic shock. You have to walk around with your EpiPen. You know, that's not to be messed with. That's a serious condition. And then coming down from that, there's, you know, wheat intolerance, lactose intolerance. And yes, people do experience these intolerances.
It's possibly not just
it's difficult to get exact figures, because we don't know that we have exact figures. One thing that does seem to be happening is that, I think that one thing that's happening is that I think because people talk about it more, we're picking more people people up on diagnosis, maybe people who did struggle along, quite frankly, they struggled along, and of course they think, yes, I'll go and get myself checked, and then they're diagnosed. So maybe we're picking up on it more, maybe we understand more. So maybe there is, if you like, perceived to be an increase. We're not sure whether it's real or perceived. On the other side of the coin, there does seem to be more allergies around, but why, what's happening, very, very complicated. All I would say is, I go back to my initial statement, get yourself checked out if you think you have. Don't deny yourself foods that can make up an important part of a healthy, balanced diet unnecessarily. And the other thing is it's so unsociable, and you end up looking like a picky eater. The other issue is that if people try and use this method as a weight loss, they say, I'm allergic to this and that's why I've gained weight. That's rubbish. At the end of the day, you gain weight because you eat too many calories, not because of certain food. So what? Weight loss itself. No, it's highly exactly. It's highly unlikely. So I would suggest that what people need to do is think about what they're doing, and if they're thinking as a method of weight loss, quite simply, if you take a raft of foods out, like bread, dairy, and whatever else you choose, you're simply reducing your total calorie intake, and it's the total calorie intake reduction that makes you lose weight. Do you see that as a point? It's to do with the fact that you're taking so many foods out of your diet that you're eating less. Okay, so if weight loss is if that's the way route to weight loss, that's fine, but it's not because you're allergic to it, it's because you're cutting foods out of your diet. Probably. That is the most likely solution.
Restaurant, because that's the only foods you can eat. No coffee, no alcohol, gone by 9:30. It's not social, is it? In my mind, that's just not healthy.
No, not at all. No. Quite honestly, if you've got a real problem, then obviously you can't have the food. But I'm going to sit here and say now that we know lactose intolerance is quite a problem in some population groups, and but we do know also that people with absolutely diagnosed lactose intolerance can, after a period of elimination, so you take all dairy out of the diet for a few weeks, they can reintroduce small amounts of dairy back into their diet after that elimination period and have no symptoms. So, my feeling is that dairy, if you like it, is a great source of calcium. We've got a huge problem with bone health, and calcium is an important mineral. So at the end of the day, again, why take foods out of the diet? Because all foods can be part of a healthy balanced diet. So,
that's actually not a bad thing, isn't it?
But in this situation, again, it comes back to
there is this idea of the thermic effect of eating foods, that it takes energy to literally just absorb foods, and you can literally, it's almost like putting the body on autopilot, isn't it, just to sort of slow down everything and give it a rest before going again. Do you support 24-hour fasts? Right. Because longer than that, here's my thinking, longer than that can be a problem because it can seriously slow down metabolism, but you're not even in favour of 24-hour fasts. It's a good Penny, please enlighten.
Well, I'm not going to go and do it because I like my food too much. Why on earth should I do that to myself and put myself under that stress? I love food, and at the end of the day, it's an enjoyable part of my diet. Your body was built to eat. When you eat food, yes, there is what we call the thermic effects of feeding, and there is a calorie expenditure. And so actually, it's, you're not getting that calorie expenditure if you don't eat. So I see it as a negative thing, not a positive thing. So. No, well, I would say that's personal choice. If somebody wants to go and, not eat 24 hours, that's probably their decision. But, well, it's not for me, and I don't see any science behind it.
And the two are quite distinct. So, and I know that people want to lose weight fast. So could we almost see, like, a 30-day, quite a strict sort of diet that people go on as part of the weight loss phase? And then, as you said, could we start introducing certain foods back in, so we then develop it into, like, a weight maintenance phase? Which is, far more realistic. What's your views on that?
Okay.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Well, I think from the psychological perspective, if you can give somebody a sort of quick start, or a kick start, or whatever you want to call it, so, in the early days of embarking on trying to, lose weight, if you see some good results very quickly, it's incredibly motivating. Professionally we say half to 1 pound, maybe a kilo a week maximum, because anything more than that is not likely to be true fat. Because there's 3,500 calories in a pound of body fat. So to lose a kilo, you've got to shift the energy balance by about 7,000 calories, which is 1,000 calories a day, which is just, impractical for a lot of people. But I mean, if you can sustain a sort of quick start and you have a sort of high nutrient density, low energy type of diet, and you get that sort of, faster seeming weight loss, it's incredibly motivating. And then obviously start to introduce foods in. But the bottom line is that if you reduce the number of calories you need according to your energy expenditure, you're going to lose weight. And as you take those calories down, you'll lose weight faster. But then there seems to be a sort of if you like, a tipping point whereby you don't want to put your body into a bit of a state of panic saying, literally, oh my goodness, I'm not getting enough calories, therefore I'm going to slow down my metabolic rate, which will happen on very low calorie diets. So at the end of the day, we have to be quite sensible and say we've got to shift the energy balance. So one of the things I would say is, and I've seen it over and over again in strict diet weight loss plans, that they don't encourage physical activity. And I actually had some client in the other day saying, well, actually I'm on this very low calorie diet and I've been told that we're going to do this in a few weeks, so we can't do physical activity because we haven't got the energy and we're too tired. Where does the sense in that?
Having listened to you so far, you wouldn't be a big believer in metabolic typing either? No truth in it whatsoever, or just something that needs further exploration?
No.
Right.
Put it this way, I haven't seen anything that's really scientific that would make me change my mind to support it. And I have read around the subject quite a lot. I mean, it sounds great, and it sort of ticks a few boxes in your mind about this, that, and the other. But again, show me the evidence and show me the lobby of evidence to suggest that this is why you're fat and why you're going to lose weight. Again, if you start to look at what you're doing, you're taking certain foods out of your diet because you're told to, and you reduce your calorie intake. Hey, you lose weight. Surprise,
we spend a lot of time talking about dieting readiness. We have this idea that sometimes we just set ourselves up to fail because it's the wrong time in our life, we've got so much else going on, etc., etc. Any sort of guidance you could give people if they're embarking on a weight loss program? It's another leading question. I'm sorry, Penny. We're actually covering a lot of ground, aren't we?
Well, gosh, where do I start? I think, yeah. I know. Oh, absolutely, yes. Okay, weight loss guidance, readiness to change, all of that stuff. Unfortunately, I think some people, although, they're in their head, and they desperately probably do want to lose weight, there might be some reason why they're not quite ready to start. It could be so many reasons. There could be so many stresses going on in their life. Why start a weight loss program? Because to some people that could be another stress. So I think you have to find out what's right for you. And I've worked with clients long enough to know that you could see people and all the words come out of their mouth, and yet in your heart of hearts, and they sort of know that they're not quite ready to do that. And then one day you might meet them in the street, or they come back to see you and they say, right, I can do it now. And, there's a lot of involved reasons for that. And we do have questionnaires to find readiness for change and so on and so forth. But all I would say is to anybody who's listening to this is, try your hardest, but don't beat yourself up if you fail in your own head. Because failure is a very negative thought, and you end up going into this spiral. Exactly. And of course what happens is, again, it comes down to setting your sights too high sometimes. If you try and make too many changes and set your sights too high, you're going to build in failure from the start because you're just not going to manage it. Whatever you do has to be achievable and realistic and targeted. So, we talk about these smart changes. I'm sure probably other people you've talked to have talked about smart changes in maybe physical activity or anything else in their life. And what we do, smart means specific. So what you're doing is specific, measurable. It's got to be something you can actually say, yes, this is the measurement I did. So, I'm having one extra apple once a week or something like that. There's got to be a measure. It's got to be achievable. Is it something you can actually realistically do, or is it going to make life hard? If it's going to make life hard, then don't do it because, sooner or later you'll trip up and stop doing it. So smart, S-M-A-R, realistic. It's got to be something that you can actually, achieve, and something that's maybe in a certain time frame. So for a client I might say, okay, you're eating absolutely no fruit and vegetables. We do see people who do this. And so, the government recommendations here and in many countries is 5 portions a day. In some countries it's higher, up to 10. But whatever it is, if you're eating none, it's not a very good idea. So we would discuss about how they could build that in. So they might say, okay, I might put some raisins on my breakfast cereal, or I might have a tomato or 2 with my supper. And so on and so forth. And what they'll do, they'll make it very targeted and say, right, on Wednesday I am going to, have 1. And if they don't achieve it, it was because there was a reason. So they've got to start thinking about the fact that why they didn't achieve that and how they can. So I know it sounds sort of slow and laborious way to do it, but it actually, for every change you make, it's a step in the right direction. And if you could make a change a week, in 4 weeks you've made 4. In a year you've made 52. And 52 changes in a year, my goodness me, is substantial. So I don't exactly. So not to be underestimated. So what we do is.
We're still a long, long way away, aren't we? And if we ever do find one, we're going to be dependent on it. And I dare say there's always going to be side effects. Enough said.
Absolutely. I think so. I mean, put it this way, there's dodgy weight loss pills that you might be able to find somewhere, not to be encouraged. There are a couple of prescription pills you can go and get. But again, they only work, and I say work in inverted commas, if you are looking towards healthy eating changes and dietary changes positively and getting some physical activity in there. So, in other words, they sort of might assist, but they're not going to be the magic wand at all.
Is he people on the go?
Meal replacements, there have been some interestingly, there have been a lot of studies on meal replacements, something like very low calorie dieting, and there's various forms of meal replacements. And sometimes, people, buy these meal replacements or they prescribe them or whatever, and they get along with them very well. We see usually incredibly good weight losses if you stick to it. The problem is they're hard to stick to. Sometimes people miss the chewing if they're liquid meals. Some say that you have to have 2 in one day and then you have an ordinary meal in the evening. So, you're promoting food as well. So I think all I would say is it may suit some people. If you weren't into cooking and if you were on the move a lot and all you had to do was have your meal replacement, it might be a good way to control your food intake. So for some people it would be good. For other people, they'd say, I really miss chewing, I can't cope with it, I really love my food, I prefer to go to, X, Y and Z. So all I would say is it's horses for courses, and they may well suit some people and some people can do very well on them. Exactly. And of course, if somebody has lost on meal replacements and then they go back to normal eating and they start to see their weight creeping up, it's easy enough to maybe just have a meal replacement at lunchtime every week for 5 days. I remember it was on BBC, do you remember there was the diet trials? And they used liquid meal replacements in diet trials, as I recall. And, liquid, I would say, there's some nice research that's been coming thick and fast about not just liquid meal replacements, but volume of food, i.e. liquid. And a lot of research has gone into, for example, having a bowl of soup before you eat your meal. And it's obvious, really. If you have a fluid, it tends to take up a bigger space in your tummy, so to speak, and maybe better at controlling your hunger and appetite. So possibly putting a liquid rather than a solid meal replacement is better. So it's just looking at what the research is saying, and there might be some value in that for some people.
I think, really the message I'm getting today is that, I've got a very similar formula. You've got fat, where the F is for frequency, or the timing of the meals, the A stands for amount, or the quantity, and this is the whole idea of portion control, calories, points counting, which is calories in and out. And then T is just the type of food, which is the composition and the difference that makes. And that's really your key message. That it does still come back to those 3 key factors stick together.
Exactly. I think you're absolutely right. And, because if we start talking about, for example, you said fat, so frequency, yes, how often, the amount, well, portion size is just, king when it comes down to weight control. And then type, we start getting a little bit more technical there about the type of, it could be, the big picture, the type of food you eat. So you have more whole grains, fruit and veg than you do, say, oily and fatty foods, or it could be, we could narrow it down to the type of carbohydrate you eat, the type of fat that you eat for health, and so on. So, how far do we want to go? But I think FAT, frequency, amount, and type is excellent advice.
That's still calories, and roughly. Sorry, Tanika.
Well, I think yes. 1,200 is reasonable to aim for, because you see, once you start going too low, we don't want to put the body into a bit of panic. But from a nutritional perspective, it's very hard to get a nutritionally complete diet. The lower the calories that the diet goes, the harder it is to become nutritionally complete in terms of vitamins and minerals. And the sorts of things I would really key in here. I mean, I've written many a diet plan and analysed it and evaluated it. And it's so tough to get things like enough calcium and enough iron in your diet. And these are really important things that we should ensure we get enough of. And if the smaller amount of food and the fewer calories you have, the harder it is to achieve that. And that will affect your long-term, possibly affect your long-term health. So, I would say be sensible and try and keep, a reasonable
and more realistic
energy intake to support your activity. Don't do loads and loads of activity. You would lose weight on a higher calorie intake.
And their size and okay.
Well, it will depend on their activity levels. I must admit I would possibly put women a little lower than that. I mean, I've seen some studies which show that many women are actually existing and maintaining weight on 1,600 calories a day. So if you start eating 1,600 calories a day, you're not going to lose any weight. Right. The only route you've got there is to increase your activity. If you're quite sedentary in your lifestyle, then maybe that's not low enough for a woman. But that would have to be, you have to be a bit cautious there. So maybe aim for a little lower.
I always go by whether I'm either gaining weight or losing weight, and that's enough for me. But I know some people might be a little bit more precise.
Well, yes, absolutely right. I think once we start getting into direct figures, it starts to get a bit more complicated, and then you start getting into counting things, and that might suit some. But I would say that actually most women need around 2,000 calories a day, and most men need about 2,500 calories a day. That's Mr. and Mrs. average, I mean, that's a bit of a statement. But to lose a pound a week, you've got to take 3,500 calories out of the diet, which is 500 calories a day. So on a 7-day week. So therefore, if a woman is 2,000 a day, she's got to go to at least 1,500 or less to lose 1 pound in a week. And a man, if he needs 2,500 calories a day, will have to eat 2,000 calories a day or less to lose a pound. Do you see where the maths come?
They're definitely out, right? Everyone's still following these, or are they?
Well, I wouldn't say, it depends what depends how you classify low. Carbohydrates are our key energy nutrient, and we're pushing physical activity. So, it's an important part of the diet along with everything else. But, are we just thinking bread, rice, pasta, cereals, potatoes? Let's clarify this. Carbs are in fruit, carbs are in some veg, carbs are in yogurt, carbs are in milk, carbs are in beans, carbs are in pulses. So the concept of a low carb diet means you're reducing those wonderful foods, and I can't run with that now.
And you're going to want to eat all of those sources of food. There are extra sources to get. And your body's better at regulating blood sugar levels.
Yeah, but when you're a sports person, you can just eat so much more than anybody else. And so you see, right. Yeah, we don't talk percentages, you see, when it comes down to sports people. We talk grams per kilogram body weight. So what we do, we take their body weight and we work out according to the type of activity they do. It can be quite prescriptive, how much protein they need, how much carbohydrate they need, and so on and so forth. And it's done on activity levels and grams per kilogram body weight. And so what we're doing now is becoming more prescriptive. For the average listener who is just, keeping regularly active and trying to manage their weight, I would just say, eat a range of foods, focus on whole grains, lean meats, fish. I mean, if you're trying to lose weight, you probably need a little bit more protein, to be honest, because it knocks your appetite and it potentially helps your body composition. And so maybe the lower the calories you go, the more protein you need in the diet. But that doesn't mean to say you go out and eat 500 gram steaks. That's not necessary.
Sometimes the 40-30-30 is recommended, isn't it? Or is there huge individual variation?
Well, I can see there's massive individual variation. I mean, I can see, why people would say 40, 30, 30. You've got a slightly more protein if you're taking your calories down. You've got a slight less carbohydrate because, you're probably not needing the carbs depending on your energy levels. And in terms of fat, we do need about, generally 30 to 35% energy from fat normally. We know if we take fat down, it might help a little. But it's the type of fat I'd be more worried about rather than the amount, to be quite frank. So try and use fats from that are more unsaturated and with the essential fatty acids. And then things like oil-rich fish, salmon, sardines, herrings, mackerel.
It might be a calorie is a calorie. It's sort of add to your diet, but it certainly forms part of a healthy diet, and it is something that should be encouraged.
No, absolutely. Absolutely right. And I think that, in the days of the real low fat era where fat became the demon, people just took all fat out of their diet, and that means they weren't eating enough oil-rich fish. They'd have white fish, but they wouldn't have salmon. They weren't eating avocados. They weren't eating nuts and seeds, and these are all wonderful, wonderful sources of essential fatty acids and the types of healthy fats that we need for good health. So I think we've turned the corner on that one, and we're looking at not so much low as type. Yeah, so you'll see, it's the fat that you find on the edge of meat and bacon. When things solidify, if it's a casserole or a stew, you'll see it on the top. Butter, lard, pastry, and things. Also, remember in catering, Noel, what we call a shortening. So when you fry things and you put more fat into something like pastry or French fries, they become crunchy and harder. You know what I mean? So more sort of flaky, if you like. So that's an indicator of more fat, and obviously it may be not necessarily saturated fat, but more fat. So if you want to reduce saturated fat, yes, reduce meat pies, sausages, hard cheese, eggs, butter, lard, and certain pastries, cakes and biscuits really, and obviously cream, sour cream, creme fraiche can be a source of saturated fat too. So they're the sort of things we should probably have a little bit less of. Well, trans fats act like saturated fats really. So you can find trans fats naturally in some foods. But only in tiny, tiny, tiny amounts. And the problem is, they're not on the label. We don't really know where they are. The key there is look for hydrogenation. If you see hydrogenation or something that's hydrogenated on the food label, it's probably going to have trans fat in it. So remember, trans fats have a similar effect on blood cholesterol as saturated fats. The other way, they're formed when liquid vegetable oils are turned into solid fats through the process of hydrogenation. So foods containing hydrogenated vegetable oil, which has to be listed on the label, the food label, might also contain trans fats. So we find them in biscuits, cakes, pastries, and margarine. So quite frankly, keep those to a minimum in your diet. I think you're going to have to talk to somebody else about pH levels. It's not something that I know anything particularly about, to be quite frank. And, I think that there's bigger things to worry about in terms of health and wellness.
Much of the attention now is just trying to satisfy people's hunger. And, this is where it's all about being nutrient-dense foods, high fibre, low GI, or glycemic load. And also this one keeps cropping up a lot too, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's obviously a huge issue, and we haven't touched on what we call GI, glycemic index. Again, as we talked about the type of fat, this is type of carbohydrate, and when a carbohydrate or foods containing carbohydrate are given a score rating, they can be tested and given a score rating called the glycemic index, and if it's a high glycemic index, it's absorbed quickly and pops your blood sugar up quickly, and when it's a low glycemic index, it does the reverse, and you'll get a sort of slower, steadier rise in blood sugar, and you obviously have a moderate glycemic index, which is somewhere between the two. Now, in practice, it can be a useful tool in dietary planning, but again, it's not the magic wand. It takes the focus off fat, calories, and everything else. So there could be lots of salt in there, could be lots of fat in there, because remember, when you put fat into a product, when you put fibre into a product, it lowers the GI of a food. So just because it's low GI doesn't mean to say it's necessarily something you should use a lot of. Not to put too fine a point on it, chocolate and ice cream are low GI.
Like a lean fat burning machine, for want of a better expression. It's all about keeping your metabolism as high as you possibly can. We basically break metabolism down into basal metabolic rates, In fact, you could probably do this better than I can, Penny. So,
yes.
So take people through what sort of makes up metabolism, or what influences metabolism.
Yes. Well, metabolism is basal metabolic rate, really. The synergy is there, so you can, and it can be measured, and that's the calories you burn at rest. So, if you just lay down and you didn't move, and the calories you're burning in that period over a 24-hour period would be your metabolic rate, and you do that over 24 hours. Now, any calories burned over and above that is the thermic effect of activity. So you've got calories burned in activity, so that's additional to your metabolic rate. So the more activity you do, the more calories you burn, the more your total energy expenditure. And then obviously there's a thermic effect of feeding, so that when you eat, you get a slight energy expenditure from the different foods that you eat. And that's quite a small amount. And there's other things that might impact, like stress and so on. So metabolic rate is all about to do with how many calories you burn at rest, and how can we look after our metabolic rate, or don't go low calorie, and exercise regularly, and keep regularly active, and that's the best thing you can do to metabolic rate.
I sound like a recording because I've said this so many times to so many people.
Is it? Well, yes. I'm a huge believer in resistance training, and most people don't do enough, and particularly for women, because we start with less muscle than men, genetically, and so we tend to struggle earlier. And it's so important for so many things, for your bones, for to look after yourself. It's to do and also to help you burn lots of calories. There's lots of reasons to do resistance training. So I would say, get down and push some weights, because in years gone by, we used to carry lots more. We used to, naturally do more resistance training. I mean, just think about it. If you go into a supermarket or a gym or something, they've got automatic doors. You're not even pushing your hand against the door anymore. I mean, that in itself, putting a force on the muscle, but pushing a door out is in its small way, a little bit of resistance training. We're not even doing that anymore. And we don't even wind our car window down now. We just push a button. So, it's really important to try and replace what we would normally naturally have done, in daily living years and years ago. I mean, more recently, just on a personal note, I had occasion to drive a car that didn't have power steering, and it's so much tougher. And the figures will show you that you burn 20 calories an hour more when you drive a car without power steering than with. And of course, the other thing is, in terms of resistance training, you really have to tug on that wheel to park. So, but let's face it, a good way to do it, pop down the gym, throw some weights around, well, not exactly throw some weights around, let's be sensible. But, do some resistance training too.
I think in fairness,
that's really great in terms of
exercise. It only happens in quite fit individuals. It's not going to be for everybody, is it? Yeah.
The afterburn, EPOC, as I remember it, the post-exercise oxygen consumption, that you have to actually work quite hard for a long period of time to get that. So, if you're going to just do,
right. Penny, we've covered an amazing amount of ground. I hope people listening sort of realise that.
In heavier training.
You could talk on so many different subjects, at depth. It's been great listening to you. I really appreciate it. Is there anything you'd like to finish with?
Well, I would just say to everybody that's listening, just hang on in there. Planning and preparation is the key. Don't jump into anything. Listen to this information. Think about it. Think about what's right for you, and obviously try and make small steps and some changes towards steps in the right direction. And Rome wasn't built in a day. So what positive improvement you make in your eating, it's a step in the right direction, and well done. Big tap on the back. Don't undermine the smallest of changes. You'll get there in the end, I'm sure.
Brilliant. Well, you've been listening to Noel Lyons and Penny Hunkin. If you'd like to find out more about Penny, you can go to www.energize.co.uk. And thanks for listening. We'll talk again soon. Bye then.